Okay, perfect. So today, this afternoon, we're going to have a career chat with an attorney, which is part of the helping path, the helping pathway. And Zaren, just to clarify, there are two types of attorneys. There are prosecutors and defenders, right? I mean, there are many, many types of
In
attorneys,
criminal
but
law, pretty much. But yeah, there's a lot of other types of attorneys.
there are obviously many different types. But in criminal law, there are prosecutors and attorney and defenders. What are you?
I'm a prosecutor.
You're a prosecutor. What does that mean?
That means when a crime happens and police take a report from whoever reports it and they submit it to the prosecutor's office for review, we review those cases, determine if charges need to be filed, file charges if appropriate.
Got it. So to potentially you are like the guy on Law and Order at the end.
I guess, yeah. Maybe not that good, but
All right, let's get started. So we're gonna first get a little bit about your background and history, on your journey from, childhood, high school, up to now becoming a lawyer.
Okay.
So tell us just about yourself.
So my name is Zaren Craddock. You can see there, my job title is the Deputy District Attorney. There's a lot of people in my office. There's the district attorney, who's an elected official, and then deputy district attorneys are the ones who handle the cases on a day-to-day basis. Alma mater, I'm assuming you guys want an undergrad for that?
Sure, yeah. Well, let's hear a little bit about your journey from high school to all the way to becoming a lawyer. So you went to Fresno State first?
Correct. And from there, I entered the workforce first as a juvenile corrections officer in Tulare County for about a little over a year. And the goal with that job was to get my foot in the door as a probation officer. I studied criminology at Fresno State and graduated in 2009. So around 2011, I became a probation officer and worked in Kings County doing that for about 3 years. And then as a federal pretrial officer for about 4 years before going to law school in 2018. And pretrial officer is kind of the same as a probation officer, except we supervise people who are going to trial and pending criminal matters in federal court. And then working with attorneys there, working along closely with defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges on a day-to-day basis is what made me kind of want to go to law school. So studied for the LSAT and got ready to go.
Nice. And when you were a kid, you did not want to be a lawyer or a probation officer or a pretrial officer. You wanted to be an FBI agent?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things I wanted to be. That kind of changed when I got into college, started studying criminology. I wanted to work more with people than just investigating crime. And so I decided to go into corrections, meaning, community corrections, probation, parole, stuff like that.
Okay, well, let's get into a little bit more about being an attorney. So can you tell us about your, the day to day, what a regular day in the life of a lawyer looks like for you?
So for me, for every attorney or any attorney at any district attorney's office, it can be different. For me, it involves a pretty lengthy calendar in the misdemeanor unit. We prosecute a lot of DUIs, thefts, misdemeanor domestic violence cases are fairly common as well. And I prep the calendar. I usually have about 30 cases that might be on any given day, particularly through Monday through Wednesday. And I need to know what's going on in those cases, so I make sure I have at least a brief summary of the facts, what's going on in the case. Has an offer been made? Have I evaluated the strengths of the case to make an offer? And that involves looking at the evidence. Are there witnesses available? Any number of factors that could go into making sure a case is ready to go. And then a lot of my times, it's actually kind of fitting that we're on Zoom right now. Most of my appearances lately, due to COVID, have been on Zoom, so I'm able to work mostly from my office. But usually from 8:30 through about 3 to 4, I'm in court technically on Zoom, and I'm trying to multitask between cases being called with the 2 other attorneys that are in my courtroom. So it's a lot of jumping from task to task, which for me is difficult. I never thought of myself as a good multitasker, but between cases being called, I'm jumping from either filing a case or responding to emails from defense counsel, sending discovery, which is the evidence that we have in our possession, to attorneys when they request it. Any number of things. Running out and trying to talk to a supervisor or chief to get some advice in between cases and making sure my cases aren't called while I'm doing that. So it's pretty fast paced.
So do you actually like in Zoom meet with the people that you're representing, or that you're not representing, you're the prosecutor, so you don't, or do you meet with witnesses? How does that work in terms of meeting with the other lawyers?
The usual hearings we have are arraignments, which is someone's first appearance where they met with their defense attorney. Their defense attorneys are working in the courtrooms to meet person to person because they're representing them. Or pretrial hearings, which are just a status conference to see what's going on in the case. If I have a hearing that requires me to put on any kind of evidence, I actually go to court in person and do that. Make sure my subpoenas for witnesses or exhibits are marked and ready to go.
Cool. How often does a case actually go to trial versus how often do you like reach a plea deal with the defense attorney?
Oh, the vast majority of cases are reach some sort of plea deal, probably like 95 to 98% of the cases.
Okay.
On any given week, I'll have anywhere between, trials are usually set on Thursdays, and I usually have anywhere between 3 to 6 cases that could potentially go to trial. Obviously, not all those cases can go to trial. There's 12 other attorneys in the misdemeanor units, all with 3 to 6 trials set that week or that day. And depending on courtroom availability and whether witnesses are ready, that kind of determines what cases go to trial.
Okay. You've been doing it for 4 months, right?
Correct.
How many times have you gone to trial?
I've had 3 trials. Three trials so far.
Okay, cool. And how long did each trial last?
They're pretty quick. DUI cases are usually pretty fast because you have your officer witness or 1 or 2 officers as witnesses. You might have an expert to testify about blood alcohol levels or effects of drugs on the human body and the levels of the drugs. And you might have if there's an issue with like a blood draw for someone's drug DUI, you might have a phlebotomist to testify that the blood draw was done in a medically approved manner, that there was no way it can be contaminated. So any issue that comes up, we could have a witness to testify to any of those foreseeable issues. And they usually take about 2 to 3 days. What happens is your case will get assigned out to a trial court, and you'll pick a jury, which takes about a half a day to a day. Then you'll have pretrial motions, which the judge kind of determines what evidence is going to be admissible. And then you do evidence, closing arguments, and then jury deliberations. That usually 3 or 4 days at most.
Okay, cool. Are you allowed to talk about the outcome of your 3 cases that went to trial?
I can talk a little bit. I've lost 2 and I've won 1. So
okay, that's pretty good.
And good. It doesn't really get to me. Like if a jury finds someone innocent, that's justice has been done. And,
there you go.
The cases that go to trial are because there's tribal issues in the case. So the case doesn't usually go to trial just because a client feels they want to go to trial. Usually their defense attorneys will tell them, look, this isn't a good case, you're going to lose, you should just plea. But if there's something really at issue, then it'll go to trial.
Yeah,
Generally,
absolutely.
There's exceptions to that, of course, but that's the general kind of thing we see.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. So what inspired you? Well, before we do that, does anybody have any questions about what a daily, like the day in the life of a lawyer looks like? Or do you have any questions based on what Zaren said so far that you want to clarify? I don't want to see questions just till the very end.
What I'm saying is pretty specific to a prosecutor, particularly in my position. There's a lot of other different types of attorneys out there, and I can kind of, briefly talk about that too if people are interested in other kinds of law or law school. So I'm open to any questions like that.
These are new.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the other types of lawyers that you can potentially become, or that you might consider becoming?
Well, there's criminal, of course. You have prosecutors, defense attorneys, and then the civil side, you have. I think they're roughly categorized into transactional attorneys, which could be like tax attorneys or attorneys that prepare, merger documents for corporations, and then you have litigation attorneys, which I'm a litigation attorney on the criminal side, but a litigation attorney on the civil side might file like a civil lawsuit against the company for doing something wrong or violating some type of administrative law, or filing a lawsuit against an employer for violations of employment law, and they'll litigate civil cases on that side and possibly go to trial. So there's a lot of different stuff out there. I think someone had a question.
Yeah, I got two questions here. So does it ever get too much for you mental wise? And then the other question is, how long do you work daily?
Mental wise, it's very difficult. There's so much going on. Things can go sideways really quickly. So not only you have to rely on your preparation, but also to be flexible despite your preparation going completely out the window at any given moment. It's also what makes it fun though. So I can prep my calendar the night before. It usually takes me about an hour, maybe a little more if it's if there's a lot of weird, if there's a lot of domestic violence arraignments on for the next day. I have to prepare criminal protective orders and have arguments for release conditions, or if misdemeanors, it's kind of unusual, but generally there are rare cases where we do argue for someone to not be released. Craziest case. I'll get there. I have a couple interesting cases.
Okay, let's go through first. So it's
mental wise, it is challenging. But also what helps with that is, like I said, there's two other attorneys in my courtroom. There's 4 misdemeanor courtrooms, so there's 12 of us total. And the teamwork and the feeling that everyone's kind of got each other's back, and the help that exists in the unit kind of helps you push through some of that mental stress. So it's fun.
And I was going to say, and do you like the problem solving, like the chat, like you were a probation officer, pretrial officer before that? Would you say that this is more challenging, but also more like satisfying and stimulating?
Yeah, in different ways. The jobs are very different. Yeah.
How long do you work daily?
I usually get to the office around 8:15, and then I work pretty much solid through 5 o'clock. Come home, take a break, and then I usually work about from 7 to 10. I do stuff for my cases. So
do you have to work on Saturdays and Sundays?
I try to avoid working on Saturdays, but I usually do work a pretty full day on Sundays, prepping the stuff for the week, prepping trials, writing responses to motions, getting the calendar ready for Monday, filing cases. Oh yeah, filing cases takes a lot of time.
And then from Yasmin, is the court in charge of your salary?
No, so my salary is technically in charge of the county, and there's a bargaining unit, which is like a union that negotiates with the county for our pay, and that's pretty much determined by the people that are in charge at the county level, county government officials.
And do prosecutors versus defenders, is there a field of attorney, of lawyering, that is more lucrative than others?
Well, all the money's on the civil side. There's not much money in doing my job, but I think the reward are the intrinsic benefits of representing the people, holding people accountable for when they've committed, crimes against persons and state. And then you have the same thing for defense attorneys, though. They may ensure their clients are protected, their civil rights are protected, that they're given representation, because you have all these resources on the side of the government, and defense counsel's job is to kind of protect their client from all that. So I see both sides, and I'm not necessarily one side's better than the other. They both have their purposes, in my opinion. So
their roles in society.
Exactly.
All right, Michael, I promise that we will come back to craziest cases. Let's go through and ask a couple more questions about the journey towards becoming a lawyer and what you have to do, and we will kind of end on the crazy cases. Is that a deal?
That sounds like a good plan.
Okay. All right. So tell us about going to law school. You mentioned the LSAT earlier. Can you talk about if one of our students wanted to become a lawyer, what should they start doing now? What do they need to do to become a lawyer? And I'm going to also go to the next page so we can see some pictures here.
I don't know what to put here. I guess so. Those pictures, that's the courthouse I work at. I don't go to it very often. My office is actually across the street. And, I just put some what I like to do in my free time, which I do have free time once in a while. I like to play video games with my friends. So I post a little screenshot from my Steam profile there.
Still playing video games with your friends.
Always.
Oh, great.
Definitely not as much as I used to, though. Most of my time is spent filing cases and working.
Oh, there, got it. Yeah. So just again for the audience, I think you guys have realized some of these people, most of these people are contacts that we know. And Zaren and I also went to high school together, and he liked playing video games when he was in high school. So I haven't seen him in 10 years and still playing video games. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the steps to going to law school. So the journey to get there.
So I obviously started a bit late. I worked for about 8 years before deciding I wanted to go to law school. But I think most people generally will go to law school like either right after undergrad because they know that's what they want to do, or they don't know that's what they want to do and they just like, well, I'll go to law school, which is fine. There's a lot of stuff you can do with a law degree, and you can kind of figure it out in law school what you want to do with it too. So there's nothing wrong with that, but it is an investment. For me, like I said, working alongside judges and attorneys in the federal courts made me want to go to law school. So I started studying for the LSAT in probably spring of 2017, hoping to go to law school in the fall of 2018. So that involved a couple months of studying, practice tests. Studying for the LSAT is at least a part-time job. I would study for about 3 to 4 hours after coming home from work. So my old job was pretty much 8 to 5 most days. And then I would do a practice test or two on Saturday mornings. So that was kind of like having a part-time job. And then once you go to law school is at least having, I don't know how people do it and work at the same time. I think law school, to do it properly, is a full-time job plus a part-time job with the amount of time you spend in class and studying. Hats off to the people who have kids or other jobs that have done it all at once, because I don't think I could have, to be honest with you. So
where did you say you went to law school again?
I went to UC Hastings, which is a standalone law school at the UC University of California system in San Francisco. So I resigned from my job and went to law school the following week in August of 2018.
Cool. And so then law school took you how many years?
3 years. Most full-time law schools are 3 years. 1L a year, that they call it the first year of law school is 1L, 2L, 3L. The first year is standard courses in civil law, civil procedure, torts, criminal law, what else did we do? Constitutional law, those kind of things that you take pretty much the same way at every law school. And then your second and third year, you can start doing kind of the fun stuff or narrow on what you want to study. So,
what's a tort?
A tort is think of it as a civil offense. So if someone damages your property, or you get in a car accident and you suffer some kind of property damage or personal injury, that is a tort.
So Judge Judy is tort.
I'm not too big of a Judge Judy fan. I don't know what she is involved with. So
they're usually like civil cases where
I gather most of the TV stuff is civil stuff.
Do we have any questions from students about what it takes to go to law school, the LSAT, or anything else before we kind of move on to something else? So just to clarify, you have to go get a bachelor's degree first in any subject. You did criminology. Doesn't really matter. And then there are no prerequisites to get into law school in terms of coursework, like poli-sci. No. You just have to take the LSAT, which you said is a very, very hard test that you need to study for at least 4 to 6 months beforehand.
Yeah.
And it's a time test, right? So
correct.
very difficult.
The
4 different sections on the LSAT, you said?
5, and one is an experimental section, so you don't really know which one is necessarily the one that's not graded. It's about like, the test goes from like 8:30 in the morning to about 1 or so.
Okay.
It's not too long of a test.
So then you go to law school for 3 years. You learn all the rules of law, the language of law, torts and criminal law in your first year. Second and third year, you get to specialize in like the areas that you want to focus on.
Right.
And then you graduate, and then you get to go be a lawyer wherever you want. That's it.
I mean, wherever you can. Yeah.
But like, do you have to get any like certification, or is there anything else that you have to do?
So the big thing is the bar exam.
There you go. That's
what you were getting to.
Right.
That, you know, it's a 2-day test. The first day is 6 essays. And the second day is 200 multiple choice questions.
200 multiple choice questions?
200. 4 sections with 50 questions.
Okay. And what's like, how well do you have to do on it to like, is it easy? Like, is it like, oh, I just need to go in and it's like CCB, DA?
So I studied, after I graduated law school, I signed up for a study program, and I studied about 10 hours a day, every day for about 2.5 months. Just solid bar prep, studying, and memorization. And if that itself is its own challenge. And thankfully I passed the bar on my first try.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. But I mean, it's doable. It's, you know, I don't consider myself that smart of a person, you know, if at all, but if you do the work, you can do it. So that's the good thing to know. If someone has reservations about going to law school and being successful and passing the bar, if you put in the work, you put in the effort, you can do it. So I think that's my message about that. If anyone ever, you know, has doubts about what they want to do, and if that's stopping them.
Okay, so we've got a couple more questions. 2, same thing. How many total years? How many years does it take and cost? So I think it depends on how you look at it, right? Like for you, you started, you know, you worked for 8 years, but let's pretend you were 18 years old. You had just graduated high school and you are planning to be a lawyer. How many years would it take for you to go from high school graduate to ready to become a lawyer?
7 years, 4 years.
7.
Some people can do, you know, some people can do undergrad in like 3 years. You know, depending on how many units you have that transfer from AP classes to your college, and then how much of a load you carry in undergrad. But yeah, 7 years for most people. Like I said, some people take a year off. They work or they do something. They figure out what they want to do. You know, it just depends on the person. You know, I've had a lot of my law school friends or anywhere from scientists to engineers to bartenders before they went to law school. So, yeah.
I actually studied for the LSAT in 2017 for a little bit. I briefly stopped working at OFY in Northridge, and I thought about studying and taking the LSAT and going to law school.
I remember talking to you about that.
I came right, but yeah, I got laid off from OFY, you know, 5-6 years ago for about 2 months. And then as soon as they called me back, I said, I'm coming back. I don't want to be a lawyer.
Thankfully being a lawyer is nothing like the LSATs. So that's a good
The LSATs were really hard. Like studying for the LSAT was really, really hard. Like I only spent about a month doing it. And there were the problem questions. Maybe we can look at one of the questions afterwards if we have time. There were these logic questions, students, that were just the hardest ever, but it was really exciting when you like went back and looked and you got one right and you were able to figure out like, oh wow, I like just used like a part of my brain I didn't even know I could, you know, it was like deeply asleep somewhere. So it was also really fun to study for
different type of test for sure.
Yeah, they're totally different type of tests than everything I'd ever seen before. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what motivates you, what you do when you want to give up, and your hardest professional obstacle to overcome.
So motivates me. So I just think, you know, the teamwork thing that I talked about earlier, going to work and being around a lot of like-minded people who, you know, have your back, who have you have their back as well. I think that kind of everyone in the same boat, kind of going through the same struggle is motivating. I don't know if anyone's ever had that experience. I think maybe people or your students have been involved in team sports. It's kind of similar to that. So, and then of course,
everybody in every chat so far has pretty much said that relationship building is the most important thing. So thank you for.
And I think going into the workplace in general with this is just something that this is kind of how I kind of view it. I mean, your people you work with are essentially your second family. So it doesn't mean you have to be their best friend and hang out with them all the time or outside of work, but it means, you treat them with respect, you support them, and, it's kind of it's your second family. So.
What do you do when you want to give up?
Complain to one of my work family members.
Process.
Yeah, just, process the problems and know that you're not the only one that's going through whatever struggle it is you're going through, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel. That and the successes that come along with taking a case to trial, or negotiating a deal on a case, or even a big part of it is giving someone a break or a chance that when you think they can do something with it. So.
And do you have like the ability, like the jurisdiction or the authority to do that? Like to basically say, you know what, I'm looking at the data, I'm looking at the evidence here, and I want to be more lenient with this person this one time, or first offense?
Yep, I had a case just recently that was kind of like that. Someone with some personal issues in their over the past years dealing with COVID, and they got a deal on a DUI that normally a person wouldn't get, but every case is an individual case. So you can't just say, oh, these types of cases get, this kind of deal, or this kind of case gets that kind of deal, because every case is kind of an individual case on its own.
Trying to see like the humanity in all
Exactly.
of these things. Cool. All right. What was your hardest professional obstacle to overcome?
This has been kind of a thing throughout my career. Definitely public speaking. Public speaking is terrifying, and here I am, an attorney. So
Maybe in a career chat.
If you asked me in high school or middle school if I'd ever be an attorney, I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And that's just been, just overcoming one little thing at a time. Like, I remember in middle school, like English class, being terrified to get called on to read out loud. And I know you know what I'm talking about, because I think we were in the same class.
Mr. Kellogg.
Yeah, exactly. And now, I'll go into a courtroom and stand in front of 50 jurors and ask them, questions about their personal lives that are difficult questions to answer in any kind of situation. So talking to everyone here now on Zoom is kind of like, well, it is public speaking. I can do it. I couldn't have done it right off the bat, right after graduating from college, but it's one of those things where you just, I know it's something I have to do. I have to do it if I want to do what I want to do. So I just force myself to put myself in uncomfortable situations. And it's like a muscle, when you work it out, you get used to it, you get better at it.
Like a growth mindset. Just like a growth mindset. I think our character education class is learning about growth mindset right now. Some of them might be on here and know what I'm talking about. So, okay, cool. So let's talk about, what do we got here?
Just some of the things I like to do in my free time. I think that the picture on the left I took when I was cycling up in the hills, and then spending time with my dog, who you can see on the bottom of that picture at the beach. So.
How old is Asha now?
She's old. She's 16.
Wow.
I think that picture was just last summer, so she's doing well.
Nice. Okay, cool. And then let's talk about takeaways. What life lessons has your work taught you? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And what advice do you have for your students? And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll spotlight you. So there we go.
Oh, okay. Sorry, what was the first one?
So first one, takeaways. What life lessons has work taught you?
I think just developing a good work habits and work mindset, and that doesn't necessarily mean be the first one at work and the last one to leave. It also means a work-life balance. It means getting along with others, helping others, and also allowing yourself to receive criticism, particularly when it's constructive. Hopefully it's constructive.
Feedback.
Not every workplace is the right fit for someone. And I've worked in places and for people that I didn't always agree with, but you maintain professionalism, whether you're an attorney or a doctor or a nurse, an engineer, a business person, or whatever job you work with, you're going to be working with people on some level. And so I think those kind of, just being flexible and being relatable and patient with people, it pays off. And you never know who you're gonna work with, or who's going to be your boss at some point in the future. For example, one of the attorneys I worked closely with when I was a federal pretrial officer worked cases, coming up with solutions to get people out of custody and back home, but with conditions that would, address their whatever issues they had. One of those attorneys is now a judge that I see in court. So, if I was a jerk to that guy when I was an officer and he was an attorney, what would he think of me now? So you just never know. Treat everyone like you might be working with them the rest of your life or later in life, because you really do never know.
Thank you. And then where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh boy, I don't know. I'm not one of those people that I don't have a crystal ball. Still working as an attorney, probably in criminal law, but it could be in another unit in the DA's office, or I don't know. That's my plan now, is to stay doing what I'm doing. I enjoy that.
Thank you. All right, craziest case ever. Or craziest case you can talk about.
What do you
Well,
mean?
Michael, can you come off mute? I know you're comfortable coming off mute. Can you clarify what you want from craziest case ever?
Okay. So what I mean by craziest case is literally the craziest case, like a case that you had that just made you go wow, I'm looking at this right now. Has there ever been a case like that?
That I've tried or filed or?
Yeah, that you've been a part of, or just, yeah.
But we also are still in a school presentation. So
I'm not sure I can talk about the craziest case.
Okay. An interesting case that you would like to share that you thought was interesting for our students to hear. Sorry, Michael.
Well, this isn't that crazy, but I think this kind of shows you just how weird issues can be in a case and trial. I had a case. It was a DUI. It wasn't alcohol. The substance that was used was methamphetamine. But the officers the entire time did not think the guy was under the influence of methamphetamine. They thought he was under the influence of alcohol, which the jury didn't like the fact that officers didn't even know he was under the influence of meth. So, you just have these weird issues that come up. I don't know. I assume most students don't necessarily know the symptoms and side effects of alcohol and drug use necessarily, but methamphetamine and alcohol have very different effects on the human body. That's why that case went to trial. The guy didn't even look like he was on meth. He didn't really look like that he was on alcohol either. The levels from the lab were high, and that's why the case went to trial. And we proceeded with it. There's domestic violence cases. Those can be, in misdemeanors, those aren't usually that terrible. There are some that are worse than others. Some of the misdemeanor cases they're not all that serious, so I haven't had too much exposure to them. Sorry, I can't talk about the craziest case. There's one that comes to mind that's really funny, but also really inappropriate for this environment.
Thank you. I appreciate you keeping it to yourself. Sorry, Michael. So sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Go watch Law and Order or Criminal Minds and pretend like Zaren told you one of those stories.
I can say how the incident ended. A lot of things happened between a car accident and the guy getting arrested. But the guy, when he was getting arrested, thought it'd be a good idea to try and kiss the police officer that was arresting him. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That is pretty funny. That's a good one.
Um,
Do we
but,
have any other questions about, Michael, I think asked about the cost of law school.
It's expensive. I think law school tuition costs, assuming they haven't gone up extremely since I started in 2018, is anywhere from about $45,000 a year to $55,000 a year just for tuition. Tack on about $2,000 more a year for books, at least. Cost of living and expenses. Total, I would say, to get through 3 years of law school, it's about $250,000.
So it's definitely an investment.
Yeah.
So then if you wanted to go into the law, but you did not want to necessarily make that huge of an investment, what would you recommend doing for our students to kind of see, do I want to go to law school? And by the way, guys, there are other law schools. There are law schools that there's like tiers of law school, right? So like not everyone's going to go to Harvard, right? Zaren went to UC Hastings, which is still a very prestigious law school. There are also other law schools that are more local that you could go to that don't cost as much money. But what would you recommend for somebody who's trying to figure out, do I want to invest to go to law school?
I think, when you're in undergrad, you can intern or volunteer at a public agency like a DA's office. You can find an internship job at a civil firm if you want to see what kind of that kind of law world is like. There's a lot of things you can do. There's pre-law classes, but I think the best way to do it is to just kind of be around attorneys. And the best way to do that is to do an internship somewhere.
Internship with a lawyer, law office.
Plus, that looks good. It looks good on your law school resume if that's what you decide you want to do.
Perfect. Thank you. And then we got a couple more questions. Would you say that your job continues to get more interesting every day, like the cases you may file or hear about?
Yeah, I mean, when I open my list of cases that need to be filed, there's any number of different things in there. I think I had like, these are just misdemeanors. So like there's the possession of gambling machines, like slot machines, and there's beyond misdemeanors. There's there's the felony assignments, which includes domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, financial crimes, homicide, gangs. All those involve pretty high level felony offenses that any crime you can think of. That's what the district attorney's office deals with.
And then if you don't mind us asking, does your salary cover all of your necessities? Are you able to live on a lawyer salary?
So there's a big range. My salary is not very high, but it's also not as expensive to live here in Fresno as it is. I'm assuming most of you guys live in the LA area.
Yeah.
Not as expensive, though that's kind of changing as of the past year and a half or so, which is kind of unfortunate. But most attorney salaries will be adequate or generous starting out. I heard someone, one of my friends at the office, her friend from law school who went to the University of San Diego has a starting salary of about $200,000, which is a lot. Yeah, that is a lot of money. That is a lot more than I make. So it just depends what kind of law you go into. But also that kind of work is what I would describe as not work I would want to do. So that's the trade-off.
Got it. Do we have any other questions for Zaren? Before we end for today, any questions in the chat, or does anybody want to unmute and ask a question?
Any questions about anything I talked about? It's fine.
Overall, would you say becoming all of the investments and the expenses, and is it worth it? Do you recommend pursuing the law?
I do, and if it's something you think you want to do, like I said, volunteer or intern somewhere during undergrad. And there are scholarships available if you do well on the LSAT. apply to the law schools, they will offer scholarships. Thankfully, I got one halfway through law school, which helped pay for some of it. But like I said, the work you put into law school kind of determine how well you do during and after. So, like I said, I'm not the smartest person. The success I've had out of it has come from the work I put in. So that's, I think, the big takeaway there.
Thank you. Oh, and we have one last question. Do you ever get very emotional with some cases?
For sure.
Yeah.
I had a case where a victim testified and she did really well. And I was proud of her. It was a tough thing for her to go through. So yeah, there's that reward.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much, Zaren. I don't want to keep you longer. I know it's your day off, so I'll let you go. I'm going to thank you again so much. I'm just going to give you a round of applause for coming and spending time with us. And you have a great day. Students, I'm going to give a couple more announcements. So 1 second, I'm going to stop recording.